This presentation is provided to share background information for new local advisory committee members or new staff who are in counties with land in basins and watersheds under nutrient sensitive waters designations with nutrient control strategies. In the first half, I'll be sharing necessary background information about the strategies and the results from crop year 2023 agricultural reporting on nutrients. In the second part, I will be sharing updates on nutrient-related rulemaking revisions that will impact the agricultural sector and some of these basins and watersheds under existing strategies. It is important to be aware of the water quality regulatory activity happening across the state because this activity can significantly impact agricultural producers and can help the Soil and Water Conservation Partnership be better positioned to respond to nutrient water quality issues and assist their producers to meet upcoming requirements. Nutrient sensitive waters management strategies, or NSW strategies for short, are a group of administrative rules that the Department of Environmental Quality puts into place at one time. NSW strategies are the mitigation option that DEQ has chosen for cases of major water bodies in North Carolina not meeting state chlorophyll A water quality standards. Chlorophyll A is a proxy measure for enrichment of nutrients in surface waters. Under the Federal Clean Water Act, the state of North Carolina is required to take regulatory action to maintain and restore the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the state's waters. By taking the NSW strategy approach, the state puts regulations in place to deal with both point and non-point sources of pollution, which are all contributing to the nutrient-related issues in reservoirs and estuaries that we see in the state. Common components of the administrative rule package that make up an NSW strategy include rules addressing stormwater from new development and existing development, rules addressing non-point source contributions from agricultural lands, and rules addressing the discharge effluents from wastewater dischargers. Another common strategy component is a buffer rule, which requires riparian establishment along surface waters when there's a land use change. For instance, if cropland is sold to a developer, when that developer changes that cropland into residential houses, then that developer will be required to establish a riparian buffer or parts of the land that are under these NSW strategies. North Carolina has 4 NSW strategies that are all in the eastern and central part of the state. An NSW strategy is under development in the western part of the state and the upper Yadkin Basin. All of the existing strategies have an agriculture rule that requires an annual report on agriculture's collective activity to reduce nitrogen losses, and for some rules, uh, a report that looks at phosphorus loss risk from agricultural land as well. If agriculture did not complete these annual reports or did not demonstrate achievement in reducing nitrogen or phosphorus losses from agricultural land, producers in each of these watersheds and basins could face additional regulation, like implementation of required agricultural practices or other costly requirements. So this work that we do to prepare these annual reports is important. The oldest NSW strategy in the state is the Neuse strategy, which was designed to reduce nutrient loading to the Neuse estuary. The ag rule that was part of the strategy became effective in 1997 and was most recently readopted in 2020. The baseline for this strategy is average conditions in the early 1990s, and the agriculture sector is required to show annually that it has reduced nitrogen losses from cropland by 30% from the baseline period. Currently, there is no revision or readoption regulatory activity occurring within the Neuse NSW strategy. The second oldest NSW strategy is the Tarr-Pamlico NSW strategy, which again was designed to reduce nutrient loading to the Tarr-Pamlico estuary. The ag rule that was part of this strategy became effective in 2001 and was recently readopted in 2020. The baseline period for this strategy is 1991. Similar to the Neuse strategy, the agriculture sector in the Tarr-Pamlico Basin is required to show annually that it has reduced nitrogen losses from cropland by 30% from the baseline period, so that year of 1991. For the Tarr-Pamlico strategy, agriculture must also demonstrate that there has not been an increase in phosphorus loss risk from agricultural lands in the basin from the baseline period. This was the first strategy in the state to include a phosphorus-related target criteria, and currently there is no revision or readoption regulatory activity occurring within the Tar-Pamlico NSW strategy. The first NSW strategy in the state for a freshwater drinking reservoir was the Jordan Lake watershed, which is in the headwaters of the Cape Fear River Basin. This strategy and the ag rule included in it was set up differently than the others. Reduction goals for nitrogen and phosphorus were set by sub-watershed, and reductions had to be demonstrated on both cropland and pasture land. The baseline period for the Jordan Lake strategy was set to be average conditions in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and the rule became effective in 2009. The Jordan Lake NSW strategy is actively undergoing revision and readoption. And the last NSW strategy in the state, also for a freshwater drinking reservoir, was the Falls Lake watershed, which is in the headwaters of the Neuse River Basin. The Falls Lake watershed already had to comply with the Neuse Basin NSW requirements, but additional reductions were determined to be needed. This rule became effective in 2011, and reductions were to be measured against the baseline year of 2006. Similar to the Jordan Lake strategy, reduction goals in the Falls watershed were set for nitrogen and phosphorus and had to be demonstrated on both cropland and pasture land. Unlike the other strategies, the Falls Lake strategy staged reduction requirements by years. Stage 2 of the Falls Lake strategy has been paused by legislative action, and the Falls Lake NSW strategy is actively undergoing revision and readoption activity. As I mentioned in previous slides, all of the existing strategies and ag rules require an annual report on agriculture's collective activity to reduce nitrogen losses and phosphorus loss risk from agricultural land. For the Neuse, Tar-Pamlico, and Falls Lake ag rules, the reporting process proceeds as is shown on the slide. Local information and data is collected and reviewed by local advisory committees, LACs for short, for the 25 counties under the Neuse, Tar-Pamlico, and Falls Lake strategies. LAC representation includes Division of Soil and Water Conservation staff, Natural Resources Conservation local field staff, Soil and Water Conservation District staff or supervisors, cooperative Extension Service staff, Department of Ag staff, which is typically the county's regional agronomist, and at least 2 agricultural producers who are also county residents. The local information reviewed and approved by each local advisory committee is sent to the Division of Soil and Water and is then analyzed and summarized within the annual progress report that is then reviewed by each strategy's oversight committee. So once local advisory committees review and send in data, it goes up to a basin or watershed oversight committee. I will say there is one exception to this process for the Jordan Lake watershed. Jordan Lake never formally established local advisory committees. Instead, local field staff, soil and water conservation district staff, extension staff, and regional agronomists are typically contacted to fulfill the county data reporting requirements annually for getting data up to the state for oversight committee review. All right. Membership on the oversight committees includes a Division of Soil and Water Conservation representative, a Natural Resources Conservation Service representative, Department of Ag representative, Cooperative Extension representative, and Division of Water Resources representative. There's also 3 to 4 agricultural interest or farmer seats on oversight committees, in addition to 2 to 3 environmental interest seats that have a spot on oversight committees. Oversight committees developed the accounting methods that are used to track and report on agricultural activity to reduce nitrogen losses and phosphorus loss risk from agricultural lands. After the oversight committees review and approve each basin and watershed's annual report, the report is then submitted to staff in the Division of Water Resources. In annual reports to demonstrate the agriculture sector's collective progress in each basin and watershed to achieve set nitrogen and phosphorus load reductions, we collect, review, and incorporate a lot of different agricultural data. Data we include in annual reports is listed on this slide, and it includes data from the Farm Service Agency, the USDA National Agriculture Statistics Service, state and federal cost share conservation programs, along with local information on fertilization rates and nutrient reducing BMP implementation that is not supported by cost share funding. In our current reporting process, we rely on local knowledge and expertise to make sure local data, along with state and federal data from various databases, is accurate. So, a big thank you to all the local advisory committee members, including the Soil and Water Conservation District staff and supervisors who contribute to annual reporting efforts and provide leadership to those annual reporting efforts annually. All right. When the new agriculture rule was being drafted, the agriculture community was grappling with how reduction of non-point source nitrogen losses from the sector could be measured to demonstrate progress in meeting the reduction targets set in rule. The basin and watershed tracking methodology that was ultimately developed was an easy to use tool called the Aggregate Nitrogen Loss Estimation Worksheet Tool, or NLEW for short. This tool was initially developed for the Noose agricultural rule, and in the years since, its use has been expanded to conduct nitrogen loss accounting in all watersheds and basins with agriculture rules in North Carolina. This tool assumes a majority of nitrogen loss in a North Carolina cropping system moves as soluble nitrogen through the soil system into shallow groundwater. It estimates a baseline nitrogen loss for agriculture. It captures inorganic and animal waste fertilizer applications. It tracks nitrogen reducing BMP implementation that has an impact on soluble nitrogen movement through the soil system and groundwater, and it tracks changes in nitrogen losses at the whole county scale, adjusted for acreage in the basin or the watershed. In the annual nitrogen accounting that is completed at the basin and watershed level through the agricultural uh, through the aggregate NLEW tool, we do not report every crop grown in particular counties. So the NLEW tool was set up to capture information about the largest agricultural commodity crops that are grown in basins and watersheds. So all of those largest commodity crops are listed on this slide, and it includes things like corn and sweet potatoes and wheat and uh, different grass types, hay types, those sorts of things. In the aggregate NLEW tool, we can also report certain best management practices for credit in reducing nitrogen from agricultural cropland and pastureland. Since most nitrogen that leaves North Carolina cropping and pasture systems moves as soluble nitrogen through the shallow groundwater, the only BMPs that are reported for credit, quote unquote, in reducing nitrogen are those that impact this soluble nitrogen movement. Those practices are shown in the green box on this slide. So they include things like unfertilized and unharvested cover crops, riparian buffers, which can include things like filter strips and field borders that are directly adjacent to a blue line water control structures, livestock exclusion systems and associated setbacks, those sorts of things. Quick thing for livestock exclusion systems, those are only tabulated for the Falls Lake and Jordan Lake watersheds because those are the only watersheds that have pasture reporting requirements specifically. The Tar Pamlico and the Noose agriculture rules only look at reporting on cropland. And for water control structures, we only report structures under active contract with water quality maintenance agreements. We can include structures that are out of contract that have passed a field inspection and were determined to be maintained in a way to realize the nitrogen reduction benefits, but we typically only report those structures that are under active contract. In annual reports, both the total affected acres by water control structures under active contract, as well as the cumulative total of affected acres by structures that were implemented since these strategies came into effect that might have fallen out of contract during that time. Both of those values, active and cumulative totals, are included in annual reports. There are additional practices that are implemented through conservation programs that may have nitrogen reduction benefits that agriculture does not receive credit for in the NLEW tool. Those are things that are listed in the red box and include things like diversions or sod-based rotation, tillage management, those sorts of things. These practices primarily serve to reduce nitrogen losses by preventing erosion, and the nitrogen loss estimation worksheet tool serves to capture practices that have the greatest impact on reducing soluble nitrogen flow through the shallow groundwater. We do still include cumulative and active contract totals for some of these practices in annual reports, and some of these practices are also reported in the qualitative phosphorus loss tracking that we complete annually that I'll talk about a little bit later. This is because most of the phosphorus is sediment bound. So because these practices have a particular impact in reducing sediment losses, that has a significant impact on reducing phosphorus losses concurrently from ag systems into surface waters. So that's why we include those in the phosphorus tracking that we complete. When the Tarp-Pamlico agriculture rule was being drafted, the agriculture community was grappling with how reduction of non-point source phosphorus losses from agricultural land could be measured to demonstrate progress in meeting the no net increase target that was set in rule. The initial goal was to try and create an easy to use aggregate tool for tracking phosphorus losses similar to the aggregate NLEW tool. A committee of technical representatives from state agencies and universities examined this issue and need, but ultimately concluded that a defensible aggregated county scale accounting method for estimating phosphorus losses from agricultural lands could not be feasibly developed. This committee instead proposed that the agriculture sector qualitatively track the risk of phosphorus loss from agricultural lands by tracking several qualitative factors and comparing annual values against baseline conditions to determine yearly whether phosphorus loss risk was either increasing or decreasing. This methodology and implementation does not yield a percent reduction number annually like is calculated for nitrogen, but it does provide useful information about agricultural phosphorus loss trends. So this qualitative tracking methodology has been adapted and adopted for use in the Falls Lake and the Jordan Lake watersheds, which have phosphorus loss reduction targets for agriculture. These are the qualitative parameters we collect data on annually to complete comparisons between the current crop year and the baseline conditions to determine whether there is an increased or decreased phosphorus loss risk from agricultural lands in the basins and watersheds with phosphorus targets. So water control structures and affected acres from those structures are tabulated up only for the Tarp-Pamlico Basin. Tobacco acres are only tabulated for the Falls Lake and Jordan Lake watersheds. Otherwise, all the other parameters are tracked in all of the NSW watersheds with phosphorus targets. All right, this past spring of 2025, we concluded crop year 2023 annual reporting, and reports from the latest cycle are posted on the division's watershed initiative web pages. So I would encourage staff and supervisors, LEC members, anyone really who wants to go and look at the annual report for the basins and watersheds in which your county or your coverage area has land within. So in crop year 2023, approximately 1.4 million agriculture cost share program dollars and about 4.1 million EQIP dollars were estimated to be spent in total in NSW watersheds and basins or in counties that have land in those watersheds and basins. Nitrogen load tracking in crop year 2023 showed that the agriculture sector is meeting and largely exceeding all of the nitrogen reduction goals that were set for the sector in the agriculture rules, at least according to our current tracking methodology for nitrogen. We saw in crop year 2023 that there is a reduced phosphorus loss risk for most of the parameters that are monitored in comparison to baseline periods for every strategy for phosphorus. So these are tremendous gains since these strategies came into effect for both phosphorus and for nitrogen. And the Soil and Water Conservation Partnership should certainly, feel proud about all of the work that it's done to achieve these nitrogen and phosphorus reductions over time. That said, there's still a lot of work left to do in order to achieve the standards, the chlorophyll A standards that are set for the estuaries and drinking water reservoirs that these strategies are trying to ultimately achieve. All right, now we're at the second part of my presentation where I will share updates on NSW rulemaking that's happening in the state. So the Jordan Lake strategy is currently up for readoption and revision. Stakeholder groups are meeting and providing feedback on draft rule language currently. The Jordan Lake One Water, or JLO for short, is a coalition group that includes local governments, municipalities, corporate stakeholders, along with soil and water conservation district and farmer advocacy stakeholders. That group is also meeting concurrently to develop recommendations and to push for an integrated rule framework. By integrated framework, I just mean a administrative rule package that allows sectors to work collaboratively to reduce point and non-point source nutrient pollution instead of working on reducing nutrient pollution in each of our separate silos. So one rule concept that we expect to be part of the strategy is an existing development rule that local governments will comply with by contributing investments to a funding pool that can be used to finance nutrient reduction projects across the watershed and across sectors. So the implication of this concept is that there could be additional funding that gets made available to farmers and producers to further nutrient reducing BMP implementation or management of nutrients on agricultural land in the watershed. We also expect a cattle exclusion from surface waters collective target to be set in agriculture rule and for there to be revised agriculture sector reporting requirements to move forward with in the revised Jordan Lake nutrient sensitive water strategy. In this next slide, I've included a timeline that was sent to me from the Division of Water Resources staff in mid-March of 2025. I am anticipating rule drafting and stakeholder review to continue for at least a little bit. Formal rulemaking activities will largely occur later in the summer into the early fall, and Division of Water Resources staff, at least as of mid-March, we're expecting presentation of a strategy to the Department of Environmental Quality's Water Quality Committee in early January of 2026. If you have any questions about where we are in the Jordan Lake process, feel welcome to contact me, Allie Dinwiddie, Non-Point Source Planning Coordinator, at any point to get an update. The Falls Lake strategy is also up for readoption and revision. So stakeholder work groups are meeting and providing feedback on draft rule language currently. That process is largely being driven by the Upper Neuse River Basin Association right now. The Upper Neuse River Basin Association is a coalition group that includes mostly local governments and municipalities, but also has soil and water conservation district and farmer advocacy representatives. And they are working in tandem right now to develop draft rule language with the Division of Water Resources. So the UNRBA, Upper Neuse River Basin Association, is similarly interested, like the JLO Coalition is, in breaking down silos to work collaboratively on reducing point and non-point source nutrient sources in the watershed. So right now for ag, we expect two rule concepts to impact the agriculture sector in the Falls Lake watershed. One of those rule concepts will be what I've previously described, an existing development investment pool option that can provide some additional financing for nutrient reduction and nutrient management projects on agricultural land. And we also expect there to be a revised agriculture sector reporting requirements in the Falls Lake watershed. I am not expecting at this time any additional requirements put forth on the agriculture sector in the Falls watershed. And a large part for that is because there has been a significant loss of agricultural land in the Falls Lake watershed since reporting began. In this next slide, I have included a timeline that was sent to me from Division of Water Resources staff again in mid-March time. I'm anticipating rule drafting and stakeholder review to continue through the summer. with formal rulemaking activities to start occurring in early fall with expected presentation to Department of Environmental Quality uh, committee members in early January 26. So with that, my presentation is now concluded. If you need more information or you have questions on any of the content that I've covered in this video, please be sure to contact me. My email and phone number is listed. This is Allie Dimity. I'm the Non-Point Source Planning Coordinator with the Division of Soil and Water Conservation. And I love to receive questions and I love to update staff or farmers or anybody who's interested on where we are with some of these activities. So thank you so much for watching this video and contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.